American Public Media.
Jax PBS presents Shelter Me, stories about animals and the people who love them. Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Sponsored in part by the Jacksonville Humane Society, Subaru of Jacksonville, and Terrace Wealth Management of Raymond James and Associates, Inc. Member New York Stock Exchange, SIPC.
The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, the intersection of politics and medicine. We examine why these issues seem to be connecting more and what patients and doctors can do when it happens. Then, ever wonder what to do with those ancient VHS tapes and old family photographs? We'll tell you about a way to convert them for free. And it's not 1,000 points of light, but it is 6. We discuss the cosmic illusion of the Castor star with our resident spaceman. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or tag us on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Congress has until tomorrow night to approve a short-term spending bill to avert a partial shutdown of the federal government. House Republicans have rejected a spending bill that had won bipartisan support this week. But NPR's Barbara Sprunt reports President-elect Trump demanded that GOP lawmakers abandon it.
After intense pressure from billionaire advisor Elon Musk, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance are calling on Republicans to reject the bill. The short-term measure includes over $100 billion towards disaster aid and farm subsidies, among other things. In a statement, Trump and Vance called for a bill they say doesn't include any legislative wins for Democrats. This leaves Republicans scrambling to keep the government open, right as Congress is also prepping to go home for the holidays. Barbara Sprunt, NPR News, the Capitol.
The disaster aid relief money was intended for people affected by Hurricanes Helene and Milton in the southeastern U.S. The man accused of killing United Healthcare's CEO Brian Thompson will appear in a courtroom in central Pennsylvania today. New York prosecutors want to extradite Luigi Mangione to face murder charges. He also faces weapons charges in Pennsylvania. The Montana Supreme Court has upheld a lower court's decision on a lawsuit about climate change. It was brought by young people who sued the state for failing to act on climate change. From Montana Public Radio, Ellis Julin reports.
The Montana Supreme Court has affirmed a lower court ruling that said the state's fossil fuel-friendly policies, along with a lack of action to address climate change, have violated the plaintiff's constitutional right to a clean environment. This was the first youth-led climate case to go to trial in the U.S. Olivia Vesevich is one of the plaintiffs. She's been involved with this case for the last 5 years.
Hope is something we work towards, and that is what this case has been. We have fought to have our voices heard.
This decision means that state agencies must now consider the greenhouse gas emissions and climate impacts of any proposed development project. Because it involves the state constitution, this ruling is the final decision. It cannot be appealed to a federal court. For NPR News, I'm Ellis Julin in Missoula, Montana.
A court in France has convicted nearly 50 men for rape. A man drugged his then-wife and then invited strangers to rape her while she was unconscious. He then recorded the sexual assaults over more than a decade. The French court has sentenced him to the maximum 20 years in prison. The woman, Gisèle Pellicot, waived her right to anonymity in the case. She has been in the French courtroom for weeks demanding justice. After the verdicts today, she spoke publicly.
C'est avec une profonde émotion que je m'exprime aujourd'hui devant vous.
Speaking in French, Pellicot said that this had been a difficult trial and that she was thinking of her children and her grandchildren. Pellicot also called for a better future where women and men can live together in mutual respect. You're listening to NPR News.
And you're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's now 9:04. Enough food for 200 families is being offered today by Feeding Northeast Florida. Winn-Dixie is pitching in with turkey and fresh produce in time for the holiday. The Winn-Dixie Gives Foundation and Feeding Northeast Florida will be at Ed White High School on Old Middleburg Road in Jacksonville this afternoon at 4. Food and supplies will be distributed on a first-come, first-served basis. The state has issued an arrest warrant for Ryan Routh, the 58-year-old man the U.S. government is charged with the September 15th attempted assassination of President-elect Donald Trump at his West Palm Beach Country Club. Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody says the state's charge of attempted murder has nothing to do with what is alleged to have happened at the golf course. Instead, Moody says it stems from when Routh fled from police and hit a vehicle on I-95, seriously injuring the 6-year-old girl inside. And the federal government has refused to include the state in its investigation.
So we continue to reach out with the federal government, explain to them to need to pursue these charges, explain to them that we were doing this to provide justice to this 6-year-old little girl. And again, they responded, we should not bring charges, we should not investigate further, and they would not provide us with information.
The governor had signed an executive order tasking Moody's office and other state agencies to investigate any violations of state crimes surrounding the events. Highs in the mid-70s in Jacksonville today.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, helping NPR advance journalistic excellence in the digital age.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, when does patient care become a political minefield? We talked to 2 local physician researchers about delivering health care in an increasingly partisan landscape. Later in the program, how to digitize your dusty analog memories for free at the Jacksonville Main Library's new Memory Lab. But first, if there's one place that you don't want to talk politics, it's when you're seated on an exam table paper in a backless gown. But the intersection of medicine and politics has become an increasingly unavoidable reality in modern healthcare. Here to discuss how to anticipate and how to manage that, we're joined by Dr. Michael Koren, cardiologist with First Coast Heart and Vascular Associates, and a research scientist. Good morning, Dr. Koren.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're also joined by Dr. Mitchell Rothstein, a pulmonologist and a clinical research investigator. Good morning, Dr. Rothstein.
Good morning. Thank you.
So this was the topic of a recent Lunch and Learn here at WJCT. You both were addressing the question of politics in medicine, and it was packed. It was so well attended that we thought we would cannibalize that program and bring it here for our listeners so that people who weren't able to attend could get a sense of what's going on. If we can just start, Dr. Koren, by telling us, what are you seeing in your practice and what are you hearing about politics in medicine?
Yeah, we have concerns. We were telling you just a little while ago that we have a Monday morning meeting where we typically talk about what projects that we're working on as a group and how we're going to recruit patients for those projects and what our priorities are for the week. And more we're reading stories about politics that are influencing people's opinions about things when these ideas are not justified by medical science. So Mitch and I decided to get together and put this presentation, help people understand where is it politics, where are these functioning agencies of the government that are actually working really well, and how do we explain to people there are things that we know about medicine, there are things that we don't know about medicine, and there's a process to learn about the things that we don't know, which is what we do in clinical research. So we put that together and help people understand examples of where there are things we definitely know, and there are examples of things that we need to learn about. And that's how it started.
And Dr. Rothstein, how is this impacting doctors? How is it impacting patients when you have the presence of political pressures or partisan divides entering the conversation?
Well, it becomes more and more complicated. As Mike was saying, I think with social media having such a strong presence, everybody has a consultant with Dr. Google besides their own physician. And one of the things that we're trying to emphasize is that we're trying to practice evidence-based medicine. And the idea of what is evidence-based medicine for the public is sometimes lost in the fray. So evidence is information or facts that are gathered together so you can make a decision whether or not something is actually true or not. And the studies that we're doing are designed to try to answer those questions. And sometimes the questions themselves kind of get lost in the media. So we're trying to filter through that and present real data that's actionable and we think provides the best evidence for how people should be treated.
And I see that you have discussed in your presentation about the question of, is something good or is something bad? And you kind of make the point that that's not really the appropriate question. Can you explain that a little bit?
And that's a super important concept. So some people think, oh, vaccines are bad or vaccines are good. Well, vaccines are an intervention. It's a tool. And they're good in the right circumstances and they're bad in the wrong circumstances. And you can't actually figure that out unless you know the patient and you know who you're applying this technology, this tool to. And that's what gets lost. So I'll give you an example. We talk about masks during COVID and whether or not masks were good or bad. Well, masks are just a tool. So we've actually done studies. We've done randomized studies now that's showing that in certain circumstances, masks will prevent the transmission of COVID, that N95 masks do better than others, but wearing the mask in the middle of the beach when you're by yourself is probably unnecessary. And what has happened in terms of the political element of this is that people will say, okay, you're putting a mask on, so you believe in the government, you believe in this. So I'll tell you a funny anecdote that gets to that point. During COVID, I was upset when I couldn't go to the gym. Remember, the gyms were closed, which to me made no sense. That's healthy. That's going to prevent heart disease. And in a gym, you can separate yourself from everybody else. But I went to the gym, and my gym had mask mandatory sessions and mask optional sessions to make everybody happy. So, by the way, I was a COVID researcher. I was the principal investigator for the Pfizer and Moderna studies here in town in North Florida, and a sub-investigator for Novavax, so using different type of vaccines. So I was very connected with the area, even though I'm a cardiologist, by the way. And I would go to my gym, and they said, oh, Dr. Koren, this is a mask mandatory session. Can you please wear a mask? Sure, no problem. So I get the mask out, and I'm fascinated. Okay, do masks make it more difficult for you to exercise? Okay, so keep in mind, I'm here on my exercise bike. There's no one within 20 feet of me. So I know I'm not going to spread anything or get anything because of the way viruses work. And so I put my mask on, I'm doing my thing, and then I took my mask off for a second to put my N95 mask on, which has smaller pore size, to see if that felt any different in terms of exercise. So as I was doing this transition, somebody looked at me and said, oh, please be sure you wear your mask while you're here. I said, no problem. I'm a COVID researcher, and I'm doing a little experiment right now. So, I'll wear it, but I just want to kind of figure things out. And so one person comes up to me and clearly was from the right and said, yeah, this whole mask thing will go away once the election is over. That's what she said. Her idea was that the whole thing about masks was just a big political game. And then, I said, no, this is a real problem, and mask will prevent transmission. I'm just trying to figure out if an N95 mask is different than a paper mask in terms of my ability to work on this bike. And so I had this little conversation. She was very nice about it. Then this other guy comes up to me and says, the problem of the world is people like you that won't wear their masks. And he came from the other side, and I said, who are you? I'm actually somebody that does this for a living, and this is what I was trying to do. And he said, it's best that you and I just don't talk. So here is an example of me in my gym, not putting anybody at risk and being an expert in the area, and just trying to do a little experiment for myself and people making judgments about me based on politics.
Well, certainly COVID was a turning point in a lot of ways for a lot of people. What has changed about how people view doctors, their positions, their advice, Dr. Rothstein, since that pandemic?
Well, I don't know if it's changed so much as it's amplified. There was, for a long time, there's been a social contract, physicians in the community. The community has trusted physicians to make good decisions and to provide appropriate and reliable medical care for the community. And with the kind of loud voices of one side or the other with unproven data, that's kind of eroded a little bit of that trust in the medical community. And the medical community is somewhat responsible for allowing that kind of activism to occur without having the proper data. So just getting back to the research issue for a while, I'm kind of a true crime aficionado. And it used to be that the best evidence at a crime scene was if you had the suspect's fingerprint in the murdered person's blood, and they denied being at the scene. So that was finished. That was the best evidence you had. In medicine, the evidence that that we get is provided through studies, and so there's a whole different type of array of studies, and some are more powerful. The information you get from them is much more usable, and you're more certain of than with other studies. And the evidence that we want to present to the community is evidence that it derived from the conclusions from these studies. And so part of that is that if you take a grant to do a study on XYZ disease from the government, and you do that study, and the conclusions aren't what you thought they were going to be when you started the study, you still go ahead. Right, you accept them and you publicize them. And that isn't happening as much as it used to. People aren't publicizing the kind of studies that we normally would expect them to publish.
People also have become more, I think, emboldened and empowered to research their own health care, their own symptoms. And there is this sort of almost like a internet meme about like, I've done the research, I know, and it is difficult, I think, for doctors to push back on that. But to your point, something like fingerprint evidence has changed in terms of how reliable we view it to be in a crime scene. It is somewhat more variable than perhaps people have thought. And science also changes. It doesn't necessarily give people that rock solid certainty that a lot of people want.
Well, I don't know about that last statement. I think when you look at studies that are designed carefully, that the statistics are looked at in advance, that the populations that you're studied are well derived from the population at large, and you're looking at a very narrow answer, I think you can be very certain about.
Yeah, this is a super important point. So a randomized placebo-controlled clinical trial is an answer box, and you have a hypothesis. Everybody has the opportunity to create that experiment, and then whatever comes out of that is the truth. That's the concept of deductive reasoning, and our whole scientific world is based on that. So when you have that level of evidence, you can be very confident in that result.
And yet, just recently there's been this whole revision of should women be taking hormone replacement therapy because it does or does not cause breast cancer. For many, many years, the result of a study indicated that they shouldn't. And now everybody's saying, well, that was a mistake. Same thing with a study that was later discredited about a link between autism and vaccines. And so people see scientific studies that sometimes are later reversed or found not to be accurate.
Well, that's why we're trying to help people understand, because those are two different things. So the concept of vaccines causing autism was based on observational studies, not interventional studies. And things that you're mentioning in terms of using hormones are because there are different doses of hormones used. Remember, the devil is in the dose, or the type of people involved are different. So, for example, one of the things we talked about at the recent WJCT event was the fact that this concept of using hormones from one sex in the other sex is not a new concept. So back in the 1970s, there was a study called the Coronary Drug Project. It was a study that was done on thousands of people. And the concept is, okay, men have much more heart disease than women, and women live longer than men with fewer cardiac complications. So maybe men who are at risk should take female hormones. That study was done in the 1970s, and we gave men estrogen, thousands of men. And what happened? The men didn't live as long. They actually got worse.
Wow.
So that was not thought to be, that was, when we started that study, that was thought to be very, very different idea that turned out to be something that was an important learning experience for us. And unfortunately, that learning is not translating necessarily. That giving one sex hormones from another sex may not be the greatest idea. And there are side effects of these things that we can't always anticipate.
And I think the other thing is, medicine is obviously an evolving science. So when you give people medications for 15 years and then you look at them again 30 years later, things, signals may occur over that period of time that weren't apparent in the earlier part of the drug study. So, everybody is willing to accept that on a scientific basis, and that's part of the science, that we understand that what we have as truth today is truth to a statistical degree that's the best we can do. That over time, other factors, dietary changes, immigration, different populations that start using the same medications can produce different kind of results.
Right, but the inputs are different. Just to clarify that, the inputs to the study are different,
right?
So the outcome of the study may be different. It doesn't mean that we're changing things.
Right.
It's refining things based on more information.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about the intersection of politics and medicine. And if you've got a story about how politics has interfered or messed with your medicine, we would love to hear from you. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at WJCT.org or reach out on social media. We've got a call from Eric in Arlington. Good morning, Eric. Go ahead.
Good morning. Three things real quick. Nobody ever brings up how many millions of people were likely saved from vaccines and saved other public safety measures like masks and distancing and so on. Everybody makes fun of it. Everybody likes to deride it. But no one ever brings up the fact that it probably saved millions of lives. Second thing about the vaccine, you had
I think we just lost the call
Okay,
there.
well, I think he was trying to make the case for the vaccines. And we bring up this all the time, that vaccines do save lives, and that there were studies done specifically with the COVID-19 vaccines from Pfizer, Moderna, and Novavax that we participated in here in Northeast Florida. In fact, we had 1,500 people in Northeast Florida who volunteered for these studies. So we have firsthand knowledge of it. These have been published. I was a co-author of one of the publications in the New England Journal of Medicine, and they make a difference. They reduce COVID infections. They help save lives. But there's also a side effect profile, and sometimes it gets confused. So what we learned during COVID is that older people and people with pre-existing conditions are at risk, and they have more serious complications. Younger, healthy people tend to have very mild illness. But younger, healthy people are more likely to develop pericarditis or other cardiac complications of the vaccine. So this is where judgment comes into place, and this is why people have to work with their physician. So if you're an 18-year-old that's perfectly healthy, you may not need the vaccine. If you're a 65-year-old with asthma and diabetes, you better take that vaccine if you want to do the best you can for your health. Flip side is that if you're 18 years old and you're caring for a 65-year-old, you may want to take the vaccine so you don't transmit the virus. So all these things are individual circumstances that need to be considered before you say vaccines are good or bad.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that happens too is that social media is going to amplify all the bad side effects that occur with the vaccine. They're not going to say that, 99% of people that take the vaccine don't have any side effects at all. They'll amplify the 1% of people that do have bad side effects, and that becomes kind of the focus of what the public's hearing and the public's seeing, and it can be daunting.
And we do know that there is a design to the algorithm of social media that basically rewards things that are inflammatory or, controversial or generate a lot of feedback or blowback. Sure. And I wonder if you see more problem in the way that social media delivers those messages, or just from the people who are in political positions using some messaging as a tool for their own benefit.
There's no doubt that social media reinforces biases. It's set up to do that. And that becomes a problem because people are with people who are like-minded, and it becomes an amplification of the view, and it makes it more difficult for people to discover the truth. So what Dr. Rothstein and I are here doing is helping people understand that there's actually evidence. There is this answer machine that has provided very, very specific information that we know is credible, and we can talk about it. So again, vaccines are not good or bad. Vaccines are good for the right people and wrong for the wrong people.
And the studies that are designed to get to those answers are specifically designed to remove bias from the equation. That's one of the most important factors in selecting the people that are going to participate, including the physicians and the research centers that do it, to make sure that they have no bias in the equation so that the answers are truthful.
I think we got Eric back with another question. Go ahead, Eric.
Sorry, I got cut off there. What I wanted to say, the other thing about the vaccine, you touched on it briefly, was that it was dangerous, and it was for some people, for a very tiny, like 0.000 whatever percentage of people. But all the people that questioned the validity and the safety and the efficacy of the vaccine, none of them were ever punished for saying the things they said. These people are all still on the radio, still have their podcasts, still in politics. So we just ignored the fact that these people were all wrong, and we just let them continue on. The other thing I wanted to say was a bigger point about all this is there's sort of an intellectual dishonesty at work here among people who disregard medical science, and that is this. God didn't create the internal combustion engine or the cell phone or the internet or air conditioning. The scientific method did all that. So you can't just on one hand say, well, I accept all the things that science gives me that I enjoy, but I'm going to reject these other things. It's just dishonest. Thanks for taking my call.
All right. Great point. We thoroughly agree with you.
We've also got a call from David in Intracoastal West. Good morning, David. Go ahead.
Good morning. How you doing, doctors?
Good.
One thing I'd like to say, I think if the premise of the whole show or the process is to try to get this information into people that don't understand how an airborne pathogen or an airborne, virus spreads, we dive down into the technical aspects of the R&D or trying to explain this at a very high educated level. I think you're doing yourself a disservice by not trying to make a comparison that a layman can understand. Compare that airborne virus to a gasoline vapor or something to where the people that really don't understand this research and this subject matter can understand it. Let's face it, guys, the people that are not wanting to wear masks during pandemics and things like that, chances are they're not subscribing to the American Medical Journal. You follow? I think as your group or your study group, if you could bring in a layman type person or someone that can correlate that to someone that the general public can really correlate to what the message is you're trying to get across.
Thanks,
That's all
Dave.
I'd say.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Well, I always
Dr.
considered
Rothstein.
myself a layman when it came to this, but I think that's true. I think, some of the kind of things that we saw out in the community at restaurants, you saw these plastic barriers in separating one booth from another as COVID protection. I mean, there was no science behind that. It was silly. I mean, you had air circulating everywhere around, but these plastic vinyl structures appeared that were somehow going to be, quote, protective. So I think his point is well taken. I think at some that maybe the efforts that have been made to kind of express what we're trying to express may not have penetrated as well. But there are people who, regardless of what data is presented to them, will have an emotional reaction, and their emotional choice is what rules the day over the scientific choice.
We've been talking about the influence of politics on medicine, but historically there's also been a lot of influence of medicine on politics and helping to, inform everything from environmental health to simple things like creating a sewage system that appropriately takes care of waste. And so diseases like cholera and typhoid are eradicated or reduced greatly. So what do you see as the role of medicine in determining political agendas or political priorities when it comes to public health?
That's why we, again, have data, and that's why we have these studies that look at these questions carefully. So certainly you bring up really good points. There's been unbelievable success in medicine, and unbelievable success in medicine changing policy and doing tremendous good. So we were talking about this before. During the AIDS epidemic, we discovered around 1980, 1991, there was a problem. We used to call it GRID, gay-related immune deficiency. No one even knew what it was. We didn't even know if it was a virus. And between 1980, when we first discovered this problem, to 1989, there was an incredible amount of work that was done, and ultimately we had a treatment for it. So it took close to a decade, but we got to a treatment, and that was considered a great success. For COVID, we identified the agent in very early 2020, and before the end of the year, we had a treatment and a vaccine. So think about that. A generation ago, it took us a decade to find a solution for a virus, and recently we did that within a year. So that's incredible in terms of our ability in medicine to learn the truth and then find effective treatments and then to shape public policy. Where we went wrong is perhaps the overreach in saying that, okay, well, the vaccine's for everybody, or overreach saying that wearing masks when you're throwing out the first pitch for a baseball game is a good thing to do. So that gets into the optics of it, and then people start to pull back saying, well, that doesn't smell right to me. So the callers that have responded so far are making the point that they believe in medicine and they believe in science, and we do too. But you also have to acknowledge what you don't know. And you have to acknowledge the fact that may not be right for everybody, but we want to study these things very, very carefully and get the right medicines and the right treatments to the right people.
But some of those decisions, to be fair, are being made, Dr. Rothstein, in a very abbreviated amount of time. When you're dealing with a global pandemic, people are dying by the truckload, literally. People are making decisions that perhaps do speak of overreach, but they're doing so without the benefit of, the knowledge of, they don't know what they don't know.
That's an excellent point. And in fact, we were talking about this the other day, being honest and looking back at the decisions that were being made in time, during the height of the pandemic. Sometimes you have to use judgment and you don't have all the evidence, and you can only make your best estimate as to what's going to be best for people in general. And that may or may not be the answer when you look back on it 5 years later, 10 years later. But if you have some basis in fact and some evidence that supports your position, for example, aerosol transmission, like the caller was brought up before, you can make some decisions about that, and there's always going to be some pushback. We have a very heterogeneous population. People have all their different gurus that they go to for their information, and they're not all going to agree. But I don't think that there is fault in making the best decision you can with the evidence available at the time you make that decision.
Even if it does create some political blowback.
Even if it does create some political blowback.
Yeah. I want to talk about some of the agencies that study, medicine, that are entrusted with medical research in this country, that have themselves become politicized in the sense that people believe that they have political motives. Some people believe that they have a political agenda that goes beyond what it ought to in the world of medicine. Talk a little bit about how some of those agencies are reacting to this. Sure. and trying to absorb it.
Yeah, and that's an unfortunate consequence of what's happened after COVID, is that you have these government agencies that have very important core functions, and they do those functions actually quite well. And these are typically staffed by people who are extremely dedicated, very smart, and have all the right instincts.
And you're thinking of places like
FDA, CDC, the National Institute of Health. National Institute of Health is the biggest funder of biomedical research in the world, but they also run a hospital that takes care of people that have heart attacks. And they are excellent at what they do. A lot of basic science findings that lead to medical breakthroughs come through the NIH or NIH-funded things. So the core functions are actually really good. The CDC, quite frankly, has made some recommendations that I don't agree with, but they're really important when somebody gets sick on a cruise ship. That's a really unusual thing, and they go investigate it and figure out what caused it. Was it some problem with the sanitation system, as you mentioned, on the cruise ship? And they'll investigate that. These are very important core functions. Or if our country is ever subject to bioterrorism, the CDC hopefully has a vaccine saved up for us so we don't have another smallpox epidemic. All these things are really important core government functions. The FDA does a great job of looking at data and say, this drug has a net benefit for people. Even though there are some side effects, overall, the safety and efficacy is really important for people. So let's not forget these core functions are really, really important. And then, but it's all right to question these agencies and what don't you know? And how can we understand that better? But to the point that you made, unfortunately, one of the blowbacks from COVID was that the trust of these agencies have been eroded.
There has also been, a lot of political hay made of certain recommendations. I'm thinking particularly of our own state Surgeon General, Dr. Ladapo, who has raised questions overall about vaccines. But to whom some people attach an overall decline of childhood vaccination rates in Florida. We've seen a really precipitous decline in Duval County in particular, in the schools here, which is something that they track. And it has reached a level that is not ideal for the prevention of things like measles and mumps and these old kind of childhood vaccine preventable illnesses. What do you what are your thoughts about the messaging that he's done about COVID vaccines and whether that's impacted these
Sure.
other, this larger trend?
Sure. Well, I've invited him to have a conversation with me on our Med Evidence platform. So we have a podcast platform where we talk about it, physician to physician. He's a doctor. I went to the Harvard School of Public Health, and I've been trained there as well. And we can have a discussion about some of the things that he's talking about and what his concerns are. I had concerns about the fact that he mentioned the messenger RNA vaccines are not recommended. And I don't know what the science and data are behind that. So maybe he has something that he wants to talk about. He mentions that there weren't good studies done, but I know I've been part of those studies and I've looked at the data and I've been part of the publication team for those studies. So I'm really happy to have that conversation. But to your point, there are unintended consequences. So some of those communications are about the COVID vaccine. And I agree with some of the points. I don't think the average 18-year-old needs to get a booster for COVID because their risk is low as long as they're not in a position where they're going to transmit the virus to their grandmother. The CDC is, quote, recommending everybody over age 6 be considered for the booster. So to me, that's a bit of an extreme view. Dr. Ladapo's view that all messenger RNA vaccines are not recommended, I think, is an extreme view. And let's have a conversation about what is right for the average person, and then take that information and be able to tailor that information to each individual based on their circumstances.
We've got a call from Sarah in St. Augustine. Good morning, Sarah. Go ahead.
Good morning. I want to ask a question regarding that comment right now. Don't we owe it to our society? Don't we, as human beings in this large society, to vaccinate so that the person that's standing behind you doesn't get sick if you have the COVID and you're coughing? I understand that an 18-year-old that's healthy might not, but if he's interacting with society and getting my grandmother sick, he should, or she should.
Thanks, Sarah. That is a difficult thing for people, I think, sometimes to understand, Dr. Rothstein, the way that you are, same with masking, that what you're doing is really benefiting someone else as much or perhaps more than yourself.
Yeah, well, I think it's a valid point. I think those are still some of the issues that people struggle with, as Dr. Koren was pointing out, that the vaccine itself for an individual in an isolated circumstance may not be needed or may not be appropriate, but if that person isn't in an isolated circumstance and is exposed to people that are at risk, or that's a situation where probably the vaccine would be better.
I mean, isn't the whole idea of vaccines this sort of universal good as opposed to an individual good?
And I think that, in the history of medicine, there's nothing that's done more for humankind in terms of reducing morbidity and mortality than vaccinations.
Yeah, but it's more complicated than that. So first of all viruses are not the same. So smallpox, for example, is a big complex virus. COVID is a very simple virus. Flu is a simple virus. Simple viruses change, they're mutating. So whatever we give people for the flu or for COVID is not going to be perfect a year from now or 2 years from now. The other part of the equation is that 18-year-old is taking on some incremental risk every time they take the vaccine. And the truth is that risk is higher for an 18-year-old than a 65-year-old. It's just an interesting part is that 18-year-olds have more side effects of the vaccine than 65-year-old people because of the way the immune systems work. So it's more complicated than just doing something for public health. The other part is that the truth is that if that 18-year-old doesn't interact with the 65-year-old person and is always 6 feet away from that person, the likelihood of that 18-year-old person infecting the 65-year-old person is minuscule. So there's a lot of complexity here, and it's hard to make all that complexity go away and just make one recommendation for everybody. And that's our point, is that everybody's a little bit different. You have to look at your circumstances and then apply best knowledge to things that are going to work overall.
Well, Dr. Michael Koren, Dr. Mitchell Rothstein, thank you so much for being here and for your work. We're going to be posting on our website a link to the presentation that you did here at WJCT so people can kind of go through it on their own with audio and the visuals that you presented and see that report. But thank you so much for coming on
Thanks
today
for having
to
us.
talk about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Up next, digitizing those ancient videotapes for free. Welcome back. Well, as technology marches forward, family memories and other keepsakes are often left behind. Here to tell us how the Jacksonville Public Library is helping preserve the past for the future is Tammy Kiter. She's a special collections librarian at the main library. Hi, Tammy.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for being here. So first of all, tell us, what is the Memory Lab and how did you come to the idea of doing it?
So, several years ago, we were fortunate enough to have a tiny little digitization station that just had a few pieces of equipment. And then, through generous funding provided by the Institute for Museum and Library Services, and then a very generous grant from the Mellon Foundation, which we just received earlier this year, we were really able to expand that memory lab to provide equipment for customers free of charge to transfer their older media formats and really preserve those family memories.
And what kind of demand is there for this service?
So, in the past, really the only option was to either find a place that would do that for you or to send it out through the mail. And there's a great concern about those materials not coming back to you. Perhaps you got someone else's, perhaps they were damaged. And we are living in an age where these media formats are becoming obsolete. We often have the negatives, the photographs, the VHS tapes, the slides, but we don't have equipment to play them on at home. And sadly, some people are throwing them away because they just assume there's nothing to do with them. So the demand is there for people to be able to come in and transfer them and actively be a part of preserving those memories.
Yeah, I mean, I recall working at the TV station, and there had already been 3 or 4 iterations of video tapes that were used in cameras, and they kept changing every few years, and there was no equipment to play them on. So we'd actually have to take them to a place on Bay Meadows that does that kind of transfer, but it took some time and there was some cost. So this is essentially a free service. What kinds of media are you seeing people bring in, and what can you accommodate?
The possibilities are almost endless, just like people's memories are. We knew there was a great demand for VCRs. A lot of us held on to those VHS tapes. We even have a Betamax available.
Wow.
So we really did research on other existing memory labs to see what kind of equipment they had available, but also just talking to one another and talking to our customers to get a real idea of what people were looking for. We wanted to use this money wisely, and we wanted to provide equipment that would really be helpful to our customers. So the VCRs get used very often, but we also uniquely have film projectors. 8 millimeter, Super 8, 16 millimeter. We have flatbed scanners that will accommodate up to 12 by 17. We have a book eye scanner that will accommodate 18 by 24. Almost anything you can think of, we have the equipment to accommodate that.
The slides, those things that used to go in those giant carousels that families
Absolutely.
have.
We see those very often, actually. A lot of families handed down these negatives and slides onto other family members. And really, it's such a blessing for us to be a part of this. We're actively sharing in people's memories. We've had customers that have come in with materials on slides and they've never actually seen them before. And all of these materials are being saved onto a flash drive, an external drive. You can put it into the Google Cloud. It's important to note as well that the audio and video are transferring in real time. So if you have a 90-minute VHS tape, it takes a few minutes to set it up, takes 90 minutes for it to play and transfer, and then a few minutes to make sure it's properly transferred onto your device.
And so, I mean, all of those things, I guess, can be time consuming for an individual. So if you've got a big box of photos, do you advise people to do anything to prepare their materials before they come in? Or are they just coming in with these huge piles of things and sitting there for hours upon hours?
We are seeing sort of every every type of customer. And if they call ahead of time, we can have that conversation with them. Our website also provides a lot of helpful information. And I think it's important to note that the memory lab sometimes sounds intimidating to people who maybe aren't really technologically savvy or haven't used this kind of equipment before. Our staff is always available. And there are several pieces of equipment that do require an appointment, such as the film projectors. We also have an audio reel to reel, like they would have in a recording studio. So we can discuss these things with customers ahead of time or when they come in with giant canvas bags. We can talk to them about maximizing their time. We also invite people to come in. We have whole families that will come in and work on different equipment together. You can maximize your time while perhaps one person is actually transferring the VHS tape that takes quite a bit of time. The other person can actively be scanning negatives, photographs, slides. You can look through things ahead of time to get them in order. We do have a fast photo feeder that basically works like a scanner or a photocopier would, and it will accommodate your teeny tiny high school photos of all your kids up to 8 by 10, and you can feed about 30 photographs in at a time.
Oh, wow.
It very gently feeds them through, and it actually scans both the front and the back, so you never have to lose all of that important information on the back of it. So you can get those things in order before you arrive and maximize that time.
And you can also, I mean, I would guess for people's music collections, if they have CDs or even cassettes still that they're wanting to digitize, are those also real-time transfers? So you're listening to the entire album?
They are real-time transfers, and as far as the audio goes, we can do vinyl albums, we can do audio cassettes, all those tiny tapes from your camcorders, we can do mini DV, we can do high 8 VHC. All of those things are in real time. We do like to remind our customers there's a balcony just off to the side of the memory lab if you need to recharge with some caffeine or bring a snack with you or get some fresh air. You'd be surprised how quickly the time goes. Because for a lot of people, they haven't gotten to watch these things or listen to them in years. And if they're bringing their kids with them, sometimes they haven't seen or heard them at
I
all.
would imagine some of it could be a really emotional experience to witness.
Absolutely. It's not really a joke, but we let our customers know who are having a hard time. We keep tissues at the reference desk. Some people are seeing family members that are no longer with them. Um, and, it's usually a joyous occasion that people are coming in to transfer these materials. But we have actually had people come in to create like a video montage for a funeral or a viewing. So we really serve our customers in multiple ways. One of those really unique ways, we do have disk drives, so you can bring CDs in with them. We also have microfilm and microfiche readers. Our veteran population is able to come in, and if they have their records on a microfiche or a CD, they can actually come in and retrieve all of those really valuable VA records, and we can help them transfer them onto a flash drive.
So seeing that this can be time consuming, are people allowed to make reservations for a unit so that they know that it'll be available?
They absolutely can. So the only pieces of equipment that require an appointment are those film projectors and the audio reel to reel. But you can go online and you can reserve that piece of equipment so that you know it is there waiting for you when you come in.
Sounds like there's some planning to be done ahead of time, but good information on the library's website. Tell us what that is.
So, on our library's website, you can visit our services. You can go to Memory Lab, and it will show you every type of equipment that we have. And there's also some links to tutorials. If you feel like you might want to get a little more comfortable with the equipment before you come in, you can do that. And you can also book your appointment online. You can reach us by phone as well at 904-255-BOOK, BOOK.
Well, Tammy Kiter, thank you so much for coming in and talking about the Memory Lab. It sounds so cool.
Thank you so much for allowing us to come in today.
Absolutely. Coming up next, our resident spaceman unravels the cosmic illusion of the star Castor.
MoCA Jacksonville presents Spectral Subjects, an interactive art installation that transforms MoCA Jax's atrium into a thermal observatory that changes with every visitor interaction. Information at mocajacksonville.unf.edu.
Grassroots Natural Market wishes its customers a happy and healthy holiday season, offering seasonal local organic produce, groceries, vitamins, herbs, and more for all of your seasonal needs. Holiday gift cards are available, located on Park Street in 5 Points.
Argentina's President Javier Milei is a self-described anarcho-capitalist. He loathes government and has promised to take a chainsaw to state spending. Who exactly is being cut down?
After the 10th of the month, I stop going to the supermarket. The bills come first, and then we'll see. I often only have tea for dinner.
That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
On the next Fresh Air, filmmaker and writer sexual fluidity, beginning perimenopause, and the related fears of losing her libido and getting older. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
It's been a banner year for women's sports.
And it's official. Simone Biles is the Olympic all-around champ, and 2 Americans make the podium here in Paris.
From Simone Biles to Caitlin Clark and Coco Gauff, these athletes gave us something to cheer for and attracted record audiences. Next time on 1A, we celebrate their success and look at where the gaps remain to level the playing field.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, it's not 1,000 points of light, but it is 6. Here to tell us about the cosmic illusion of the Castor star is our resident spaceman, Eddie Whistler, the planetarium director at the Museum of Science and History. Hey, Eddie.
It's such a wicked title. I love it.
Which title? Your title or the
resident spaceman?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
so
come on.
Cool.
Not everybody.
You did that.
I think actually that was like a David Luckin thing.
Of course
feel
it
like,
was.
Because
of course it was.
Yeah. Well, anyway, only you could be our resident spaceman.
Well,
nobody else could take that mantle. So
yeah, it's good. All day long.
All day
Heaven
long.
Stars.
And all night. So let's start with what's this is actually something we can see currently. This Castor star in the night sky.
It's just so it's the time of year where this is just now making its debut for us. Really, it'll be high overhead early in the evening. More late January, about a month from now into February, really be high up. But we can see it low in the east early. And then as the night wears on, it makes its way more like overhead. And if you were to look east and let's put you outside at 8:30. Now it's high enough above the horizon that most people would have it above their neighborhood roofs and nearby trees. Look east and just quiz somebody that is out there with you and say, there are 2 stars that are up that they call the twins, Gemini. Which 2 do you think it is? And, people would scan the sky towards the east, and this is how I do it with my kids, right? So we go outside, and I'm like, there are 2 stars. They call them the twin stars. Which ones do you think they are? And after scanning the sky, looking around, they both successfully did it. So I think most people would look at these 2 stars. They're about the same brightness. They're close enough together that they're separated by about 4 fingers held out at arm's length, something like that.
Got an interesting gauge of space and distance.
Oh yeah. So hands at locked out at arm's length. You've got the shaka sign. You got pinky.
Thumb and pinky.
Yeah, you got so fist out. And they give you different measures of degrees on the sky. All that is easily found online. And so you put up in the nighttime sky, and you're looking up, and there they are, the two twins. One of them is Castor, and one of them is Pollux. And the cool thing about Castor, which if you were to see them in the east, one is pretty much above the other one, almost like a single file line. The one that's above the other one is Castor, and that one we had discovered over time, little by little, is you're going to see it as one point of light with your eyes. I don't care how good your eyeballs are. You could squint if you want to, fine. But it's really 6 stars. So it's a 6-star system all interacting with one another gravitationally.
Bananas.
Yes.
So do you see it if you have a telescope as 6 stars, or do you need one of the super powerful science scopes to see?
So just to give you a sense, as telescopes got better, or the first person to see it was, late 1600s, early 1700s with their telescopes there as this one point of light, Castor, being 2. Oh, look at that. It's actually 2. That's 2 stars. And then as telescopes got better, one of those 2 became 2 themselves. Wow. And then 2 of them became 4. Look, both of those things both have separation. And then we discovered that the other one, we start losing track, right? And so then the other one became 2. It's really, no star system really likes to be 6 stars or 3 stars in some kind of crazy
How unusual.
Dance. So how they organize themselves, anytime you have like a 4-star system or something like this, typically they break out into binaries. And so 2 stars orbiting around each other, and then those 2 orbiting around another 2. So, 2 stars have a central point of gravitation that they're orbiting around. And then some other far-flung, but also nearby to them, has a common center of gravitational influence. And then those 2 points of gravitational influence are orbiting around each other. So you have maybe a 4-star system or a 6-star system, but they're really broken up into 2.
So this is not unique to this star. This is something that other star systems have.
Thing. Yeah.
How common? I mean, how many of the stars that we see as one point are actually multiple?
Over half.
What?
Come on. Isn't that crazy? So we're so sun centralized, and the way that we're centralized, the way that we think about life is always geared around our experience. And so we have this one star as our sun. Go outside, you're seeing starlight, and it's from the one star. And so we look up at night and we see the single points of light in the nighttime sky, and we think of all of them as being like our sun. But about half or a little over half of the stars that you would see as single points of light in the nighttime sky, if you were to ratchet in and magnify up, you would see that they're more than one star. Most of them are binary. Most of them are binary star systems. Binary star systems are 2 stars that are gravitationally interacting. And so they look like single points of light. But with great telescopes, we've discovered this. This is something that we had to make room for because we discovered it over time. It's not something that you could see. Our ancient ancestors did not know this about the sky.
What is the most amount of stars in any of these multi-star constellation, or what do you call it? Stars.
So
not a constellation.
Groupings of stars get massive, and you can get into what are called globular clusters, which are tens of millions of stars. So it's a gradation up.
All right. So many questions, so little time. Eddie Whistler, it is so great to talk to you.
That's
Thank you.
why I come back often.
I appreciate it. We'll see you next month.
So next month.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Happy 2025.
Happy 2025. Join us tomorrow when our Reporter Roundtable discusses the week's headlines from a Metro Park redesign to an illegal gambling scheme. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Jack's Chamber, with 3,000 members in Northeast Florida, is dedicated to driving economic growth and ensuring everyone has the opportunity to succeed. Membership offers business leaders opportunities to connect with each other and with the community. More at Jack's Chamber.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Who did it for you this year? Caitlin Clark, Coco Gauff, or the great Simone Biles? Whoever it is for you, there's no doubt women's sports has entered a whole new league. From WAMU and NPR in Washington, this is 1A. Hi, I'm Nyla Boodoo. 2024 has been monumental for female athletes. Take women's basketball. The NCAA women's basketball tournament drew in more viewers than the men's, 18.9 million. Women's sports across the globe are expected to rake in more than $1 billion by the end of the year. Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, Simone Biles, Katie Ledecky, and Sha'Carri Richardson are now all household names. Today, we break down the year's biggest moments and we look ahead. What sports stood out for you? Email us at 1a@wamu.org.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The federal government could partially shut down late tomorrow night. That's because congressional Republicans have decided to oppose a bipartisan government spending bill. President-elect Trump demanded they torpedo it, saying it should not give anything to Democrats. Members of the Conservative Freedom Caucus have expressed frustration with House Speaker Mike Johnson's management of the bill. Caucus Chair, Maryland GOP Congressman Andy Harris, spoke to MSNBC.
Well, I don't know. I'm only one vote out of 220. Look, I think the Speaker could have handled this differently. At this point, I'm still supportive of the Speaker, but I will tell you that voices both inside the House Freedom Caucus and outside the Freedom Caucus have been very disappointed at what's happened this week.
The failed government spending bill was supposed to provide disaster relief to many states suffering from hurricane damage this year. Workers at 7 Amazon facilities across the country are on strike. The Teamsters Union says they're demanding that the online retailer come to the bargaining table to settle contracts. The U.S.'s consumer finance watchdog is taking steps to rein in credit cards that use bait and switch tactics for their rewards programs. As NPR's Laurel Walmsley reports, the moves are intended to protect consumers from illegal practices and help people save money.
We've all seen credit cards offering big rewards like free flights or cash back for signing up. But according to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the credit card companies often fail to deliver the rewards they promised. The agency issued a new circular to law enforcement agencies and regulators, warning that some credit card companies may be breaking the law, for instance, by illegally devaluing rewards points and airline miles. The CFPB has launched a new tool that allows consumers to find the lowest credit card rates available. Research from the agency has found that the largest credit card issuers charged interest rates 8 to 10 percentage points higher than did smaller banks and credit unions. And store-issued cards tend to have the highest rates of all. Laurel Walmsley, NPR News, Washington.
Stocks opened higher this morning, regaining some of the ground lost in yesterday's big sell-off. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped about 230 points in early trading.
Investors were spooked on Wednesday when the Federal Reserve hinted it may have to keep interest rates higher for longer next year to curb stubborn inflation. The central bank cut its benchmark rate by a quarter percentage point, but policymakers projected fewer rate cuts in 2025. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell says the U.S. economy is performing well. The Commerce Department says the economy grew a little bit faster in July, August, and September than initially reported. Revised figures show GDP grew at an annual rate of 3.1% during the quarter, up from 2.8% in the earlier tally. The upward revision was largely due to stronger exports and consumer spending. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington. The suspect accused in the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson is in court in central Pennsylvania. He's facing extradition demands from New York, where Thompson was killed. Mangione faces separate weapons charges in Pennsylvania, where he was detained. Los Angeles officials say FBI agents searched the home of an L.A. deputy mayor this week. Libby Rainey of LAist reports they're investigating a bomb threat he allegedly made against City Hall.
The Los Angeles Police Department said in a statement that an investigation had found that Deputy Mayor for Public Safety Brian Williams was the likely source of a bomb threat made against City Hall earlier this year. The LAPD says it then referred the case to the FBI. That's because Williams oversaw the department and other public safety agencies in his role as deputy mayor. LA Mayor Karen Bass's office said that Williams has been placed on immediate administrative leave. Williams could not immediately be reached for comment. For NPR News in Los Angeles, I'm Libby Rainey.
A French court has convicted nearly 50 men of rape. One man drugged his then wife and then invited strangers to assault her. He recorded the attacks for more than a decade. He has been sentenced to 20 years in prison. Reuters News Service says oil from damaged oil tankers in the Black Sea has now fouled several miles of the shoreline. Volunteers are cleaning the beaches. 2 Russian oil tankers were damaged in stormy weather last weekend as they sailed the Kerch Strait. That's between Russia and Crimea, the region that Russia annexed. I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card, Venture X. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Arbus Magazine's holiday issue. Support local, shop local. Featuring boutique shops of San Marco and across the city. Learn more about Gainesville's hidden gem, Carson Springs Wildlife Foundation. Information at arbus.com.
Hi, I'm Catherine Marr, CEO of NPR, where we're guided by a bold mission to create a more informed public. Join us today by giving to this station.
Call 353-9528 or visit us at wjct.org/radio.
This is 1A. I'm Nyla Boodoo in for Jen White. 2024 has been a monumental year in many ways, but especially for women's sports. They're expected to rake in more than $1 billion by the end of the year. That includes professional leagues across the world, NCAA events, and the Olympics. And the Paris Olympics this year marked the first time there was athlete parity, meaning there was an equal number of male and female athletes competing. Stars like Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, Simone Biles, Katie Ledecky, and Sha'Carri Richardson all had standout performances this year. Today, we're breaking down the biggest moments in women's sports in 2024.
Sha'Carri Richardson did not get that baton in first, but she got it across the line first for the United States, 41.
It's Aubrey Kingsbury, the penalty shootout hero for Washington Spirit.
Is that a kangaroo reference, Ronnie?
I believe so. She's representing her country.
It was a kangaroo thing.
Williams poised, can't hit, rebound Smith, another chance for Minnesota. Williams connects, plus the foul, a